What's going on, everyone? Coach Aaron here, back in another video to help you dominate a platform. Today we're going to go over the pros and cons of a upper lower split versus a full body split so you can figure out what's the best for you. So let's get right to it. Alrighty everyone, what's going on, my powerlifting people? Hopefully you guys had a good weekend and you're having a good start to this week. If you saw my videos from last week, you saw I did a bunch of different little deadlift tips, and I said I was going to maybe think about doing squat tips this week, but I've had this user submitted question here sitting for a few weeks now, so I figured, okay, let me do some research on it, think of how I want to do a video, and let's get out this user submitted question first before we maybe go on to other topics like some squat tips. And as you can tell from the title, it's going to be more about programming, and it's going to be how to set up your training week and what are the pros and cons of doing an upper body, lower body split versus doing a training week where it is full body split. So we're gonna go over to my computer, we'll go over what we mean by those two different types of training weeks and go over the pros and cons of each. So if you are someone who coaches yourself or maybe you coach other people, then this can help you figure out, based on the person, their individual needs, what the requirements are, what the recovery rate is, what issues they have, which training split may be better for them. So let's get it over to my computer. All right, so I just have a quick little Excel sheets here set up where we can go over basically a schedule for, like I said, the upper body, lower body split versus the full body split. So what we mean by upper body, lower body means that we're gonna do squat and deadlifts together in sessions and then bench in a separate session. Since squat and deadlift are gonna use those lower body muscles and then bench is gonna use those upper body muscles. I know there's some little overlap between them, but as far as the major movers, the squat and deadlift are gonna be lower and then the bench is going to be upper. Versus the full body, what we mean by that is usually combining bench with one of the lower body ones. And typically people will do squat and bench together and then do deadlift separate. So that's what we mean by full body. There are some lifters out there that maybe only train 1 times frequency on 1 or more of these lifts, or some on the other extreme that may do 4 or 5 times frequency on 1 or more of these lifts. But most of the people fall into that 2 or 3 times, especially when it comes to squat deadlift, which is what our focus of this video is going to be. So for my examples, I'm just using a 2 times frequency on squat, 2 times frequency on bench, and 2 times frequency on deadlift. The bench is not as important because you can increase the frequency on bench in these examples, keeping the squat and deadlift the same, and the idea is the same of the pros and cons for the upper lower split versus the full body split. So let's go into it. Let me show you what I mean here. So for example, let's take a look at what I have here for the upper lower split. And you can shift obviously which day your starting days for each week and everything like that. I just started on Sunday. So as an example, for a training week, 2 times frequency on each lift for upper body, lower body split, you can do your day 1, you do squat and deadlift together. Then the very next day, day 2, you do bench press. Then you have an off day, and then you repeat the process. Day 4, you're gonna do the squat and deadlift again. The very next day, you'll do the bench press, and then you can take 2 days off before starting your next week. Okay, so this is what a typical upper body, lower body split looks like. And then from there's lots of variations you can do because you're only training 4 times a week. It means you can fit these 3 off days wherever you want. So for example, you could shift this and have an additional off day here. So just as an example to show you, you could shift this another day and then put your off day here. So for example, if you did a ton of squat and deadlift volume on day 1, a ton of bench press volume on day 2, and you need more days to recover, well then you can get 3 full days off before you have to do your heavy squat and deadlift. And same thing, you get 3 full days off before you have to do your heavy bench press. And then maybe you don't do as much volume here, you're just doing a few sets of higher intensity work, and so you just take the 1 day off on Saturday completely, and then you come back up and start the week again. So you would get 2 days off on the back end for the squat and deadlift, and same thing for the bench press. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. And like I said, if you need to throw in more bench press, you can always throw in more bench press into the schedule because we're only focusing on our squat and deadlift right now and doing the upper body, lower body split. So for example, you could always put like another bench press here if you were someone who's doing 3 times frequency on bench press versus 2 times for squat and bench. But I want to try and keep it as basic as possible. So this is what an upper lower split would look like versus a full body split would look like this. So we're gonna start the same thing on Sunday, day 1, but this time we're gonna do squat and bench together. And then the very next day we'll do deadlift. Then we take that middle of the week day off, and then we repeat the process, squat and bench together, and then deadlift, and then the 2 days off. So this is what the full body would look like where you're doing squat and bench together versus the upper lower where you're doing squat and deadlift together. And the same things apply here. You can always add in your off day in the middle if you want. You can always add in more bench press if you wanted. So some people will do 4 times frequency. So they might do bench press and deadlift here, and bench press and deadlift here. So we're still keeping that 2 times frequency on squat and deadlift, still doing a full body, but for someone who's doing higher frequency on bench press, would do it something like that. But we're gonna keep it simple, so at least now you can see the difference. This is what I mean and what other people mean when they say upper body, lower body split versus the full body split. So let's start going into some of the pros and cons of each one. So I have them listed over here. So we'll start off with the first one, is that the upper body, lower body will give you more flexibility in your days. You have flexibility in both of them. I showed you where you can adjust the off days and you can even adjust to your bench press frequency. But in general, the upper body, lower body is gonna give you more flexibility because you're not training the same muscle for the back-to-back sessions. Or even if you had an off day in there, they're still, as far as your 4 training sessions, they're gonna be split apart more. So here, you could do back-to-back days and your squat and deadlift day is not gonna affect your bench press recovery. And then on the same thing, if you went the other direction, you did bench press first, your bench press day 1 is not gonna affect your squat and deadlift recovery on day 2. So it gives you more flexibility that you can do back-to-back days. You can do 1 day off in between if you want. You can do 2 days off in between if you want. You can maybe even do 3 days in a row if you had like a busy week and you have to do squat and deadlift. The very next day do bench press, and the very next day do squat and deadlift. You still have 48 hours of rest between your squat and deadlifts. So it gives you more flexibility to work these days around if you are someone maybe who has a changing schedule, and some days you have to cram a bunch of work in and some days you can spread all the work out. So there's more flexibility there versus with the full body. Depending on the person, they may not recover fast enough from this squat session day 1 in order to effectively do the deadlift session day 2. So they may not be able to do this back-to-back days that I have set up here. They might have to have 1 off day or maybe even 2 off days in between in order to get that 48 hours or 72 hours of rest before they do their deadlift session. So then there's less flexibility to work with if you are someone who can't have the deadlift here and you have to have the deadlift here for recovery. Then you can't have the squat here, so you have to move the squat here and put your off day here. Then again, you may not have the recovery here, so you may have to move your deadlift here and have your off day, and then you're like, oh crap, I have to go for my heavy deadlift on Saturday right into my volume squat on Sunday. So the schedule does not work out for you because you don't have enough off days to spread out those squat and deadlift sessions if you are someone who has trouble with recovery. So one of the benefits to that upper lower split is for someone who has a hectic schedule or someone who has trouble with recovering between squat and deadlift, is do them on the same day, and then you can spread out your lower body and your upper body sessions wherever it fits your schedule. Next up, in general, that lower body session for the upper lower session is going to be longer. Okay, so in general, for most people, I mean, it depends on how many sets obviously you do, how many accessory work exercises you do, all that kind of stuff. But in general, people can rest less between bench press, and so the bench press is going to go faster compared to squat and deadlift. So by doing the squat and deadlift together in one session, it's going to be a long session because the amount of time you need to warm up for squat, do all your squat sets, then take everything off, set everything up for deadlift, switch your shoes, everything like that, warm up for deadlift, do your deadlift sets. You may have to take more rest time on your deadlift. These sessions are gonna be longer. Versus here, doing the squat and bench press, you're gonna have maybe squat take longer, but bench is gonna be shorter than deadlift. So then you get more of that moderate time that session is gonna take. So if you're someone who maybe can't put 2 hours into a session, or depending on how much volume you're doing and how many accessory exercises, like I said, you're doing, maybe like a 3-hour session. If you don't have that kind of time in a single session, then you may have trouble with the upper body, lower body split, because this session for lower body might be 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and then the bench press may only be like 1 hour. So then you're like very extreme in your training session lengths, versus here, you may do your squat and bench press in 1.5 hours, and then be able to do your deadlift in, let's say, 1 hour. So you have more of a closer match between the length of your training sessions. All right, so the flexibility is a little bit different for inside a training session versus within an entire week. So if you're someone who needs more flexibility in the entire week, then you can do the upper body, lower body split. But if you're someone who needs more flexibility within a single training session, then you may want to do the full body split. All right, next up, in my opinion, On the upper body, lower body split, you're gonna get a more accurate reading of what you're capable of deadlift when it comes to the competition. And that is because you're doing deadlift after squat every single session. So you're always deadlifting in a fatigue state after doing the volume squat or even heavy squat. So when you go to do like a heavy single, double, or triple on deadlift, it's gonna be when you're in that fatigue state after doing the squats. Just like in a competition, you have to do your 3 attempts for squat first, your 3 attempts for bench press, and then you get to deadlift. So it gives you a better gauge of what you're capable of because it more closely matches the competition. With the full body, you're gonna be getting your deadlift done in a rested state. So at least 24 hours rest, but even if you put an off day in there between, you might get 48 hours rest. So then you're gonna be really fresh for deadlifts and you're gonna be able to do bigger weights. So that's one of the pros for the full body is that you're gonna be able to do bigger weights and you can maybe handle a bigger stress in a single training session to maybe get more of an effect. But you have to understand that maybe those estimated 1 rep maxes will not be accurate in a competition. So maybe you do your heavy deadlift day on, let's say, Friday, and you do the off day. So you get 48 hours rest between your heavy squat and heavy deadlift. And going into a competition, you think you can do whatever 200 kilos based on your estimated 1 rep max in a fresh state. But then when you go to the competition and you're in a fatigue state and you haven't practiced that fatigue state because you've never deadlifted and squatted on the same day, then you may have some kind of drop off. You may only be able to do 195 kilos or 190 kilos. And so if you pick your attempts based on, oh, I can hit 200 kilos, but you're only capable of 190, then you're most likely gonna miss your third and you may even miss your second and third. So then that takes away from the amount of attempts you can make and the amount you can put on your total because you're using a different setup for your training to estimate what you're capable of for the competition. Now, there may be some arguments here that if you're able to deadlift in a fresher state and do bigger weights and get more total tonnage in over the weeks and months and years, that may add up to more hypertrophy and more strength for the deadlift. And I don't know for sure if that's accurate and if that would be more beneficial in the long run. But if you are someone who wants to go with that idea and wants to go with the full body, then you just have to be mindful and not be biased toward the numbers you're hitting in training versus the numbers you're gonna hit in competition when you're deadlifting in a fatigue state, something that you haven't practiced in the gym. In addition, as a little bonus little tip here is that you can do a combination of this. So you can do, let's say, a full body split in the off season where you can maybe do more volume for the deadlift and do heavier weights and stuff like that. And once you get closer to the competition, especially during those peak weeks, you can then switch to where you're doing the upper lower split or even doing a session where you're doing squat, bench press, and deadlift to get that competition practice. And then you can use that as a better estimate. So that way you have some practice of doing the lifts together in a single session to get you ready for the competition. All right, next up, going off of that, your deadlift being more fresh in the full body versus the upper lower is that your deadlift technique may deteriorate in those upper lower sessions, because if you do have to do 5 sets of 5 on squat and then you try and go and do 5 sets of 5 on deadlift, then you may be tired in your lower back, your hips, your quads, and maybe just mentally and physically you're just like low energy, everything like that. And so when you go to deadlift, then you may have more back rounding and you may have your form deteriorate because your just legs are gassed out and you're trying to use other muscles. With the full body, since you're getting that 24 or even 48 hours of rest and you're going home, you're eating, you're drinking, you're sleeping, everything like that, coming back fresh-minded, then you can come back and you can attack your deadlift technique and execute everything much better when you are fresh and it's the first exercise of your training session. So if you're someone who maybe has trouble with technique already breaking down, then you may not want to do the upper lower split because it may just compound it. And then you're always deadlifting with bad form, you're rounding your back, maybe you're hitching your deadlifts, you're not locking out or anything like that, and you're just ingraining that bad motor pattern. Instead, you can take a step back, go to the full body, go down to weights that you know you can execute with proper technique in that fresh state and hone in that good technique and build that up. And then maybe once you're able to handle a larger work capacity, you can look into bringing the deadlift in if you want to go to the upper lower split with the squat, but maybe manage your volume. So instead of doing 5 sets of 5 on both, maybe you do like 4 sets of 5 on squat and then 4 sets of 3 on deadlift, focusing on lower RPEs to, remember, keep that good technique. And if you want to see examples of this more in depth than just this little outline I have here of what an upper lower split looks like and what a full body split looks like with those different rest days and different set and rep protocols, is just go look at the free programs that are out there and then take a look at it and say, hey, is this an upper lower split? Is this a full body split? Is it something else? And then once you figure it out, take a look at it and say, okay, how are they doing this upper lower split, or how are they doing this full body split? So you can go look at stuff out there like starting strength, you can look at 531, you can look at Westside protocols, you can look at different companies like the Strength Athlete, Reactive Training Systems, the Strength Guys, and see how they have their free programs set up. In addition, I have a number of free programs on my website, and I did reviews of them here on this YouTube channel, so you can go check out my free powerlifting programs playlist and see examples that I have of 2 times frequency or 3 times frequency splits that are both upper body, lower body options and full body options to again give you more examples of how this can be set up, and then look at these pros and cons, see which ones you need to implement for your specific situation, and then go with the option that best fits you for that moment. And over time that may change. Like I said, going into the competition, you may switch from the full body into the upper lower body, or maybe if your life schedule changes, you get a new job or you have a family or something like that, then you may need to adjust it for whether you need the flexibility in your training week, day to day, or if you need the flexibility within a training session and the amount of time it takes you to get the session done. All right, so hopefully this video helps you out. If you have any questions about programming, you can comment them below. You can always DM me. I have my information in the description below, and I always try and answer my comments, any DMs on Instagram that I get, any emails that I get. And if you have any ideas for future programming topics like this that you want me to discuss, then again, reach me at those different locations. Other than that, hope you guys had a great day, and I'll see you next time.